A few hours ago, I gave birth to my first child. I'm saying that slowly because even now it doesn't feel real. I'm 32 years old, lying in a hospital bed in Cleveland, Ohio, wearing a thin hospital gown that never quite covers you the way you wish it would. There's dried blood on my thigh, and 4 taped into my arm. My hands are still shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline, the kind that doesn't know the emergency is over. My daughter is asleep in the clear plastic bassinet beside me. She makes these tiny squeaking sounds when she breathes, like a kitten learning how to exist. Every sound pulls my attention back to her. Every sound reminds me how fragile this moment is. And that's when my phone vibrates. Not a congratulations. Not a how are you. A demand, from my brother. The text is short, aggressive, and familiar in a way that makes my stomach drop. I need $6,000 now or things get ugly. Before I can even process it, another notification pops up. A voice message. I shouldn't play it, but muscle memory takes over. Hit play, his voice is low. Urgent. Almost whispering, like he's already in trouble and needs me to save him before anyone notices. Sam, I don't have time to explain. Messed up. I need the money today. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. I stare at the phone, then at my daughter, then back at the phone. This is how it always starts. I'm Samantha Cole. I've been the family fixer since I was old enough to understand panic in someone else's voice. The reliable one. The one who figures it out. I moved money around when he couldn't pay rent. I picked up extra shifts when he just needed a little help. I lived smaller so he could live louder. Once, I let him borrow my car for one quick errand. He wrecked it. Totaled. No insurance payout. No apology that lasted longer than a week. Just another crisis that somehow became mine to clean up. And every single mess traced back to the same things. Gambling debts, bad decisions, promises he never kept. But the story was always framed the same way. Family helps family. If I hesitated, if I asked questions, I was selfish. Cold. Ungrateful. My phone buzzes again. This time it's my dad. He had called earlier, right before I went into labor, when I told him I couldn't talk because my contractions were 5 minutes apart. You're being dramatic, he said. Women have done this forever. Now, staring at his missed call notification, I can already hear what he'd say if I answered. We take care of each other. That's what family does. As if hesitation is a moral failure. As if boundaries are betrayal. As if my role in this family was to absorb the damage quietly and smile afterward. I feel that old reflex kick in. The urge to fix, to soothe, to sacrifice. My thumb hovers over my banking app. $6,000. I could move it. I always could. But then my daughter squeaks again. Tiny sound. Almost nothing. And something shifts. For the first time, my thoughts don't rush toward how do I solve this. They land on a different question instead. If family meant sacrificing my safety, my recovery, and my daughter's stability. If family only existed when I was bleeding and still expected to give. Then maybe it was time to redefine what family actually meant. I lock my phone, I look at my daughter. And I decide that this story isn't going to end the way it always has, because this time there would be boundaries. This time there would be consequences. And this time, there would be a judge involved. The next contraction-style wave wasn't physical. IT was panic. IT hit me fast and sharp, stealing my breath the same way labor had earlier, except this time there was nothing for my body to do about it. My daughter stirred in her bassinet, her tiny fingers curling instinctively around the edge of my hospital gown when I lifted her. That grip, so small, so trusting, made everything feel sharper, louder, more real. My phone didn't stop. Message after message lit up the screen. Don't leave me on read. Sam, answer me. This is life or death. Each vibration felt invasive, like he was in the room with me, watching. And the worst part, he knew exactly where I was. He knew I was bleeding, exhausted. He knew I'd just given birth. That I was emotionally exposed in a way I hadn't been at any other moment in my life. And he was counting on it. Another voice note came through. I stared at it longer this time before pressing play. I told these guys I had family, he said. His voice calm in a way that felt rehearsed. I told them you'd come through. There was a pause. Deliberate. If I don't pay, he continued. They start looking for leverage. They start asking questions. Another pause. You don't want that. You really don't want that. He never said the word threat. He didn't have to. The implication stuck to my skin like humidity. Uncomfortable, inescapable. This wasn't just desperation. This was strategy. A reminder that if I didn't cooperate, the chaos wouldn't stay contained to him. I felt my chest tighten. My vision tunneled. My husband, Mark, had been quiet in the corner of the room, watching my face as the messages kept coming. When I handed him the phone, he didn't look shocked. He looked tired. He does this every time something good happens to you, he said gently. I shook my head, automatically ready to defend. But he kept going. Your graduation. Remember. He needed bail money that week. Your promotion. Suddenly he was about to lose his apartment. The day we signed the house papers. He called crying about owing the wrong people. Each memory landed with brutal clarity. Not just the events but the timing. The way my joy had always been interrupted, hijacked, redirected into an emergency that demanded my attention, my money, my silence. He can't stand you having something that isn't about him, Mark said. The truth of it made me feel nauseous. My mind kept digging backward, unearthing the pattern I'd spent years pretending wasn't there. I remembered emptying my nursing school savings because he swore it was for rent, only to find out later it went straight into sports betting. I remembered my credit card mysteriously maxed out after I let him borrow it just this once. The payday loans I took out in my 20s to help my dad save the house, only to realize I was the only one making sacrifices. Every time the same script. Panic. Debt. Guilt. Wallet. I looked down at my daughter, asleep against my chest now, her breathing steady, unaware of the legacy she'd been born into. Something in me hardened. Not into anger, but into clarity. I reached for my phone again, not to send money, but to open the voice memo app. My hand was shaking as I hit record. I replayed his messages, letting the words spill into the recording. The insinuations. Pressure. The quiet menace tucked between pauses. I didn't know why I was doing it. I just knew I had to. That shaky decision, made in a hospital bed, still bleeding, still exhausted, would later make a courtroom go silent. Mark watched me finish, then spoke softly. We could block him. Just for tonight. Start fresh. For her. The idea terrified me more than sending the money ever had. Because blocking him meant accepting uncertainty. It meant not knowing what he'd do next. And underneath that fear was something even worse. A flash of my daughter growing up thinking this was normal. Thinking that brothers were allowed to terrorize sisters. That love meant compliance. That family business included fear. I opened my messages and typed one word. My thumb hovered over the send button. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I couldn't send it. Not yet. Instead I took screenshots. Saved the voice notes, backed everything up to the cloud. I built a quiet, digital trail while my brother waited on the other end, expecting the usual outcome. I didn't send the money. I didn't send a reply. I sent silence. And for my brother, silence was the most dangerous answer of all. Silence didn't calm him down. I lit a fuse. By the time we were discharged and allowed to bring our daughter home, my phone looked like evidence already. Missed calls stacked on the screen like a spreadsheet. Neat rows of his name. All time-stamped between midnight and 3 a.m. Each one was a reminder that while I'd been learning how to swaddle a newborn and manage pain meds, he'd been spiraling. The drive home felt surreal. The world outside the car windows kept moving. People getting coffee, walking dogs, living ordinary lives. While I sat in the passenger seat, cradling my daughter in a fog of exhaustion so thick it felt underwater. Every few minutes my phone buzzed again. When we pulled into the driveway, it rang. I didn't answer. I never did. The voicemail came through almost immediately. You think because you've got a baby now you're better than us? His voice snapped. You think you can just ignore me? Breath. Dark. Angry. I told these people I had family. If something happens, that's on you. I stood in our entryway, still wearing the hospital socks, listening to his voice echo in a house that was supposed to be safe. For the first time, I didn't just hear it as his sister. I heard it the way a stranger would. cold, manipulative, blaming me in advance for consequences that belonged to him. My hands were steadier now as I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to my email, labeled it with the date and time. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was documenting. Later that night, while the baby slept in brief, fragile stretches, I opened a parenting group chat I joined during pregnancy. Women I barely knew. Names and profile pictures and shared advice about sleep schedules and cracked nipples. I typed carefully. I just gave birth. My brother is demanding money and threatening me if I don't send it. Would you consider this abuse? I attached a redacted screenshot. No names, just words. The responses came fast. Yes. Financial abuse and emotional abuse. You just had a baby. This is not okay. Threats are still threats even if they're vague. Please tell me you're not sending him money. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening in a way that felt like relief and grief colliding. These women had no reason to protect my brother. No history to defend. They saw the situation without nostalgia, without guilt, without the fog of "but he's family." And they all said the same thing. This wasn't normal. A private message popped up from someone named Helen Parker. I don't usually DM people, she wrote, but I work in HR and have training in harassment and coercive control. I've seen this exact pattern more times than I can count. We talked on the phone the next afternoon while I paced the living room, my daughter pressed against my chest in a carrier. Helen's voice was calm, grounded, the way professionals sound when they're naming something precisely. Family loyalty is the script people use to keep you in line, she said. Let me ask you something. Does he ever ask your dad for $6,000? The answer came instantly. No. It's always me. And when your dad lectures you about helping family, she continued, does he ever reach for his own checkbook? I laughed, a short, humorless sound. Never. There it is, Helen said gently. This isn't about family. It's about access. Her words cracked something open in me. Memories surfaced uninvited. Flashbacks I hadn't visited in years. My brother rifling through my backpack in middle school, taking my lunch money because he'd forgotten his. The day my band trip fees weren't paid and I got pulled aside in front of everyone. The humiliation. The way I'd ended up comforting him afterward while he cried about how hard things were for him. Helen listened as I talked, then asked, You're a nurse, right? Yes. If a patient told you this story, she asked, what would you call it? The answer was immediate. Professional. Clear. Coercion. Financial abuse. And what would you tell her? That she doesn't owe anyone access to her bank account. That threats are abuse, even if they come from family. There was a pause. Why don't you deserve that same advice? Helen asked. I didn't have an answer. She sent me a link before we hung up, an organization that specialized in domestic and financial abuse. I clicked through their resources while rocking my daughter in the dim light of the nursery. Words jumped off the screen. Coercive control. Economic power used to isolate and intimidate. Patterns of behavior. Not isolated incidents. Damn, why situation was ugly. But it wasn't unique. There were stories from women who looked like me, sounded like me. Women who'd walked into courtrooms shaking and walked out lighter. Women who'd stopped apologizing for protecting themselves. I closed my phone and looked down at my daughter. If other women could stand up and say this ends here, maybe I could too. And for the first time, the idea of involving the legal system didn't feel dramatic. It felt necessary. 2 days later, I was downtown with my baby strapped to my chest, dark circles under my eyes, and paperwork tucked into a folder I'd bought at a drugstore on the way. The non-profit legal office sat between a payday loan place and a closed-down diner, the kind of building you'd never notice unless you were looking for help inside. The air smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. I told a stranger things I'd never said out loud in order. Victoria Hayes introduced herself with a firm handshake and tired kindness. She specialized in cases like mine. Financial entanglements, harassment, threats disguised as emergencies. Her office was small but intentional. Resource posters taped to the walls, sagging bookshelves crammed with case law, a white noise machine humming softly in the corner to keep conversations private. She glanced at my daughter, then back at me. Start from the beginning, she said. Not of your whole life. Of the pattern. So I did that. I told her how the smaller loans became larger. How just a couple hundred turned into thousands. How I co-signed a truck for his mobile detailing business that never existed, then started getting collection calls at work when he stopped paying. I told her about the night at my dad's house. The shouting, my dad red-faced and pacing, my brother crying at the kitchen table surrounded by past due bills. I remembered how I'd scooped those bills into my purse like they were mine. How I walked out with a payment plan in my name because someone had to stabilize the chaos. Then I told her about the hospital. 4. The gown. The $6,000 demand. The threats wrapped in implication. Victoria didn't interrupt. She took notes, occasionally nodding, her expression not shocked so much as tired, in that way people get when they've seen the same nightmare play out in different costumes. When I finished, she asked for my phone. She scrolled through the screenshots, played the voice notes, read the timestamps. She handed it back carefully like it mattered. This is textbook coercive control, she said calmly. He's leveraging fear and guilt to get money. He's escalating the stakes by implying third-party danger. And he's using you as a shield between himself and the consequences of his actions. Hearing it framed that way made my throat tighten. I'm not overreacting? I asked. No, Victoria said without hesitation. You're underreacting. But that's common in family systems like this. She leaned back in her chair. Your father's role is important here, she continued. He says, we're family. We take care of each other. But somehow, we always means you. I felt a bitter laugh escape before I could stop it. He benefits from you paying too, Victoria said. Emotionally. If you keep stepping in, he doesn't have to face that his son is out of control. He gets to preserve the illusion that things are fine. And he pressures you to keep that illusion alive. She paused, letting that sink in, then she laid out the strategy. 3 parts, she said, holding up her fingers. Part 1. We file for a civil protection order based on harassment and implied threats. That creates a legal boundary. Part 2. We document coerced money transfers, past and present. We show the judge a pattern, not an isolated incident. Part 3. You stop all direct engagement. No calls, no text. Everything routes through an attorney, or nothing at all. My phone buzzed on the desk between us like it knew it was being discussed, a message from my brother. Are you really freezing me out? You know I can show up. Don't make me do that. Victoria's eyebrows lifted slightly. Has he shown up uninvited before? She asked. I swallowed. Yes. I told her about the night he banged on my apartment door at midnight until I opened it. About waiting outside the hospital after a double shift when I stopped responding to his texts. How he always seemed to know where I was. All of that goes in the affidavit, Victoria said, already writing. The more pattern we show, the harder it is for anyone to call you dramatic. The meeting ended with a plan and a stack of forms. I felt shaky but steadier than I had in days. That night my dad called. I heard you're talking to a lawyer, he said, skipping any pretense. You're really going to send your own brother to jail? I'm trying to keep my baby safe, I said. And myself, he scoffed. You think you're better than him? He's always had it harder. I felt something settle into place inside me. You're supposed to help where he's weak, my dad continued. That's what family is. Maybe that's what you think family is, I said quietly. But a judge might see it differently. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. You're going to regret dragging outsiders into this, he warned. We handle things in-house. I ended the call with my hands shaking, but this time I hit record before I did. I saved the file, labeled it, emailed it to Victoria. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving the pattern, I was building a case. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse looked exactly how it felt. Gray, tired, overworked. Concrete steps worn smooth by decades of people climbing them with heavy stories in their pockets. As I stood at the bottom, my stomach churned like I might be sick, and my baby was at home with a neighbor I trusted. My husband stood beside me. his hand warm and steady against my back. In my arms was a plain manila folder, thick with screenshots, bank statements, and a typed timeline that turned years of chaos into something linear. Something readable. I'd never wanted to be here. But I couldn't afford not to be inside the courtroom. My brother sat at the respondent's table in a wrinkled button-down shirt, his leg bouncing so fast it rattled the table. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not harmless, just exposed. Behind him sat my dad, arms crossed, jaw tight, wearing a look that said, "You did this." The 15-year-old version of me wanted to disappear, to shrink, to apologize for taking up space. Then the bailiff called my name, and that moment, there was no room left to be the kid. I had to be the mother. Victoria stood smoothly and introduced the case, her voice calm, professional. She handed the judge a neatly organized packet of exhibits. "Your Honor," she said, "this is not a simple sibling loan. This is sustained financial and emotional abuse, escalating precisely when my client was medically vulnerable." The judge, a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and the tired patience of someone who's heard every excuse, flipped through the documents. Her expression didn't change, but the room seemed to quiet as she pressed the speaker button on her bench. My brother's voice filled the courtroom. "I told these guys I had family. If I don't pay tonight, things get ugly. You don't want that." Victoria pointed to the timestamp. "The night my daughter was born." Another voicemail played. "If something happens, that's on you." The judge's jaw tightened, just slightly. Enough. When it was my brother's turn, his attorney tried to soften the edges. "Yeah, I sent those messages," my brother said, shrugging. "But it was just pressure. I was freaked out." He glanced toward me, then away. "I wasn't really threatening her. She knows I'd never hurt her. It's family talk. She's twisting it to make me look bad." I felt heat rise in my chest, but Victoria squeezed my arm. It was my turn. When I stood, my legs trembled. My voice shook at first as I answered questions about money. How much, how often, how it escalated. Thousands of dollars. Years of emergencies. Always me. Then Victoria asked the question that mattered. "Why did you decide to stop this time?" I looked at the judge, then at my hands, then back up. "Because I was holding my newborn when those messages came in," I said. "I'm a nurse. I see what stress and abuse do to lives. I knew if I gave in again, I was telling my daughter her safety came second to protecting her uncle from his choices. I couldn't do that." The judge studied me, her gaze steady and unreadable. The defense attorney stepped forward for cross-examination. "Isn't it true you've helped your brother financially many times before?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't." "Scared of him," he pressed. "Or scared of his debts?" "Both," I answered. "He might not have hit me, but he didn't have to. He knew exactly how to make me believe harm would come if I didn't cooperate." The lawyer smirked. "Isn't that just family pressure?" Before I could overthink it, I turned back to the judge. "Maybe that's what we called it at home," I said. "But if a stranger did it, we'd call it something else. That's why I'm here. I need someone outside the family to name what this really is. And if you're listening to this right now, let me ask you something. If everything you just heard was between husband and wife instead of brother and sister, would you call it just family pressure? Or would you call it abuse? And if the answer changes just because we share a last name, why?" The judge leaned back in her chair, hands folded. The room shrank to the bench. "I've read the messages," she said. "I've listened to the recordings. I've reviewed the financial pattern." She paused. "People like to say that's just how family talks." Her eyes shifted to my brother. "But what I see here is not love. What I see is exploitation." My brother stiffened. "They may call it family, Mr. Cole," she continued. "But from where I sit, this is abuse." The words landed like a gavel inside my chest. The orders followed swiftly. A 5-year civil protection order granted. No contact, direct or indirect. $18,000 in restitution through wage garnishment once employed. Court costs assigned to the respondent. My brother's mouth fell open. My dad muttered a curse under his breath. The judge delivered one final sentence that echoed long after the room emptied. Family is not a shield you get to hide behind when you hurt someone. For the first time, someone with authority named it. Not drama. Not family business. Abuse. And my brother was about to find out what that label actually cost. You'd think a court order and wage garnishment would make someone reconsider. My brother treated it like a challenge point. 2 weeks after the hearing, I was at work when a coworker leaned into the supply room, her face pale. She held up her phone. "Is this your brother?" It was a county arrest log. His mugshot, eyes wild, jaw clenched, staring back at me. The charge. Violation of a protection order. Later, when I got home, my husband showed me the doorbell footage. Footsteps pacing back and forth. A shadow stretching across the porch. A hand reaching for the knob, testing it. Again. And again. I wasn't home. He knew that my husband had been inside with our daughter. He didn't open the door. He called 911. They caught my brother 2 blocks away, pacing and shouting about snitches and family betrayal, about how this never would have happened if I just answered my phone afterward. My husband said something that finally made it click. "He knew you weren't home," he said. "He checked your location like he always does. He came anyway to send a message." It wasn't panic. It wasn't desperation. It was entitlement so deep he couldn't imagine the rules applying to him. The consequences started stacking fast, like dominoes that had been wobbling for years. The car dealership fired him after a customer recognized him from the arrest record. Wage garnishment activated automatically. Unemployment pre-shaved to pay restitution. His landlord gave notice to vacate. Public records don't care about family narratives. Employers see them. Landlords see them. Creditors see them. Even the guys he owed money to backed off. Turns out people don't like lending to someone whose income already belongs to the court. Then my dad called. "He got arrested because of you," he said. "Lost his job because of you. He's couch surfing because of you." I didn't raise my voice. "He got arrested because he violated a court order 24 hours after it was issued," I said. "He lost his job because he can't show up sober and on time. He's couch surfing because he spent years outrunning consequences." I paused. I didn't do this to him. I stopped doing it for him. The line went quiet. Finally he said, softer, almost confused. "You used to fix things. And look where that got us," I said. "I'm done fixing. The judge is fixing now." The second hearing came quickly. Protection order violations move fast, and my brother looked different this time. Exhausted, not cocky. His public defender talked about stress, confusion, family emotions. The judge didn't buy it. New orders came down like clean lines drawn in ink. The protection order extended to 10 years. 60-day jail sentence, 45 suspended. 15 days actual time. The rest triggered by any further violation. Mandatory counseling. Full compliance. When the bailiff led him away in handcuffs, I felt my chest tighten. 2 rows ahead. My dad's shoulders slumped. His hair looked grayer than I remembered. This wasn't a clean, triumphant revenge story. It was messy. There was collateral damage. There was grief. And then the realization hit me. The mess had always been there. The difference now was that it was visible. On a docket. In a file. In a system that said, "We see this. And it's not okay." For the first time, the story wasn't being hidden under the word family. 6 months later, life looked completely different, and eerily the same. I still worked long shifts. I still drank too much coffee. The house was littered with burp cloths and half-folded laundry. But the constant dread had gone quiet, and no more flinching at the doorbell. No more checking my phone at 2 a.m. No more rehearsing explanations for emergencies that weren't mine. On Thursday nights, I went to a support group in a church basement. Metal folding chairs in a loose circle. People who had all realized in different ways that family is sometimes where the deepest wounds are inflicted. One night, the assignment was to write a letter. To your younger self or to your child. I wrote mine to my daughter. "The day you turned 16, it began. I imagined her asking why she didn't know her uncle. Why we didn't have big family holidays like other people. I wrote the truth. That blood is thicker than water is only half a sentence. That real family doesn't threaten you, drain you, or make you responsible for their chaos. That real family doesn't call abuse loyalty. I told her she is allowed to walk away from anyone who tries to make her pay the price for their bad decisions, even if they share a last name. And I wrote this. The bravest thing I ever did for you was let your uncle face consequences without cushioning his fall with our rent money and my sanity. I broke a pattern so you wouldn't have to live inside it. When I read it aloud, my voice shook. A woman across the circle wiped her eyes and said quietly, I wish my mom had done that. I walked home under streetlights that night feeling lighter than I had in years. A few weeks later, an email came in from Victoria. My brother had taken a plea on the violation. Court-ordered counseling, gambling and financial responsibility. A low-wage job at a tire shop. Paychecks automatically garnished through a cousin. I heard my dad had stopped saying, Sam turned her back. Now he said, Travis has to get his act together. Clinny shift. But shifts. The memories didn't vanish. My brother was still my brother. I still remembered building forts in the living room. Him teaching me to ride a bike. Those memories didn't disappear when a judge said the word abuse. They just stopped being excuses. And here's the part people misunderstand about revenge. The real revenge wasn't garnished wages, or public records, or jail time. The real revenge was that my daughter would grow up watching me keep my word to myself. She would see me say no more, and hold the line. She would know in her bones that love and obligation are not the same thing. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to break your own heart by setting a boundary with someone you love in order to make your life safer? And if you have, what would you tell the version of you who was still scared to do it? My brother demanded $6,000. While I was in a hospital bed, convinced I'd fold like I always had, my dad called it family. The judge called it abuse. I call it the line in the sand where my daughter's life and mine changed direction. Finally, thank you so much for watching. Please leave your feedback in the comments and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story.